Hi, everyone. I am Dana Lauer from Project ARC. And if you already know me from my work in project-based learning, you know just about what I'm about to say. And pushing into that space of authentic learning so that our learners have the opportunity to affect real change in their world. So in fact, if you don't already know, the ARC in Project ARC stands for authenticity, relevancy, and community connected learning. So for the past 20 years, this has just really been my passion in terms of making this my life's work. And the journey has really been rewarding, but it's certainly been bumpy at times. Last November, so we're going on 6 months now, I actually put out a call on LinkedIn to connect with me if you considered yourself to be a disagreeable person. And if memory serves me correctly, I think, Megan, maybe you answered that call. Anyway, this post was prompted by a book that I was reading and a quote that struck me in that book. And it came from Adam Grant's New York Times bestseller, Think Again: The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. So I'm going to take just a moment here and read that quote. And it says, the ideal members of a challenge network are disagreeable because they're fearless about questioning the way things have always been done and holding us accountable for thinking again. There's evidence that disagreeable people speak up more frequently, especially when leaders aren't receptive, and foster more task conflict. And that quote just struck a chord with me. And I thought, man, we need some more disagreeable people in the education space. I can't be the only one. Tim can't be the only one. We've been disagreeable at Project ARC for the last 10 years plus. So when I put that call out on LinkedIn, we had lots of responses, and Tim and I also reached out to some individuals that we know are disagreeable. And this is episode number 6 for the last couple of months. And our guest today and on this podcast in the future may disagree with us at Project ARC or us as individuals, and they don't necessarily constitute an endorsement from Project ARC, but we're so excited to hear what they have to say because Tim and I really want to learn and grow as we think again. And we have absolutely no idea how this is going to unfold over the next 40 minutes or so, but I know that I'm excited to hear what Megan and Rafe have to say, and it's going to be a great several, I don't know, what are we on?
45 minutes, maybe,
Yeah,
if we're lucky.
45 minutes left.
Yeah. So I'm really excited too, Dana. I can't say that these are people I don't know anything about. These are two longtime colleagues of mine through work in New Mexico and the Cincinnati area. I'm also with Project ARC, obviously, and have done work with both of them through Project ARC. But I have just always been impressed with each of them and what they bring to the table by challenging some of the assumptions of education. And so it's my great joy, pun intended, to start off by introducing Megan Lawson from Sycamore Schools outside of Cincinnati. Megan, welcome to DIST, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what your DIST word is to get us started.
Hi, yes. Like you said, my name is Megan Lawson. I am currently a proud assistant superintendent at Sycamore Community Schools. I am a teacher at heart and very proud to say so. I taught middle school English, taught high school English. I've been an assistant principal at a middle school. I've been an elementary principal. And this is my first year in a assistant superintendent role, though I've held a few other district office roles. But enough about my boring resume. The thing that I would say as far as my dis word would probably be, I hope this isn't cheating, but discover. So my word is discover. I am really working with the concept of hopeful skepticism. So rather than approaching situations up front with cynicism, just a belief up front that things are bad and terrible and awful, I'm working on allowing information to unfold and trying to suspend, judgment and instead become very curious and allow information to inform where I stand on something. And in that discovery, I often find that there are things that are beautiful and true, and then there's things that are hard and true. And somewhere in the middle of all of that are great opportunities for the future. So my best learning comes from students and teachers. A intermediate teacher said to me last week, there really aren't any solutions. There's only trade-offs. And that really
Mm.
got me thinking a little bit, right? With everything that we give, sometimes something else has to fall away. I think there's some people that call curriculum, the art of designing curriculum is deciding what you do a little more of and what you do a little less of and how we spend our time. And so I'm just working on being more of a discovery person and creating more
Mhm.
spaces for people to discover together and not expecting people to be hopeful, but perhaps we could be um, hopefully skeptical.
Mhm. Well, I think you're in the right place to discover some things here tonight, Megan, because that's almost always what happens as we go through these conversations. We start to discover some new threads. So thank you for opening with that. I don't think it's cheating at all. I think it's a sincere way to start our conversation. Rafe, I'm going to hand it to you. Introduce yourself and share your dis word with us to get us going.
Yeah, my name is Rafe Martinez. I'm the executive director and co-founder of the Albuquerque Sign Language Academy. We're the only state certified ASL English dual language school in the nation. And part of our claim to fame is that we've created a really cool environment where hearing kids and deaf kids can go to school together and learn together through various just projects and modalities and pedagogies, and like everything we're doing is around community and making sure all our kids are connected to one another to provide resource and opportunity where the hearing community and the deaf community can come together. So it's been a good ride. Our school's been around for 15 years. And we just had a beam signing ceremony for a brand new, never before state funded school for us. So that's why my head's red. I was out in the sun all day in New Mexico. It's hot here, Dana. It's not cold, but I would say my dis word, and I could have taken the easy way out, Tim. I'm just because disability, right? That's kind of our,
Sure.
but I didn't. It's actually my dis word is disregard, and the whole story, the narrative of our school is really creating something where the population of kids that we work with, that we choose to serve at the core of our mission, are disregarded when it comes to school statistics, test scores, all that kind of stuff. They're the 1%ers, 2%ers that exist outside of the norm, of the mainstream norm that public education kind of claims to serve. And so we created a school to embrace that population in connection with their families and the community that they're connected to.
So that's a big one to tackle,
Mhm.
Rafe. And I thank you for throwing it in there instead of the easy one to go with disability. All that's also a good word for us to consider today.
Yeah.
Megan, it looked like you were about to jump in. I didn't mean to cut you off. No?
No, I was just processing, really enjoying learning more about Rafe. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So what comes to my mind, and I'm just going to try to put these two things together for a moment, and then you can disagree with me, um, is that the students that we disregard for all sorts of reasons are often the students who are discovering a lot of things in our classroom, right? The kids who are outside the norm are more the discoverers, right? We all have had plenty of students who do exactly what we ask of them, right? And it makes me think of a comment that I've shared on this podcast before from my first principal, um, who just celebrated his 65th birthday last week. And Bill always told me A students work for C students, right? Because A students always do what they're asked, and C students are always trying to find some way to get around the work, right? Um, and I'm just curious, like as a system of education, What do either of you think we could do so that we recognize the discoveries of the kids who are disregarded more? If I can throw that out there, or you can disagree with me.
Ask the question again, Tim.
What could our schools as institutions do to recognize the discoveries that happen in the classroom of our kids who are most often disregarded because they don't just do what's asked of them, right? I'll share a story, right? Many years ago, when I was a director of a summer program for Johns Hopkins out on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, there was a student whose name immediately will tell you, maybe I shouldn't share a name, right? But had a very, very unusual name, right? Just in case she watches the podcast, right? I don't want to share her name, but this student would tend to wander away from the classroom. Like she'd wander and stare out the window. If we go to do things outside, she'd wander away from the group outside and go and stare at things. And she was clearly engaged in an act of discovery in doing that. It wasn't that she was bored. It wasn't that she was disengaged, right? She was thinking and wandering and looking at things and trying to process, right? Everybody else thought of her as a real classroom management problem. Like, where is she going to be next? Right? Like, I turn my head for 1 minute and she's gone. Right. Um, and I sat down, I was the director of the program. So I sat down with her teacher and said, how are you finding out what's going on with her? How are you getting her to contribute to the classroom when she does this? Right? Because something's going on. And it made all the difference in the world to recognize that she was in a discovery process rather than uh, you know, I can't come up with a dis word for behavior, but a misbehaving process, right? And I think we've all had students like that. And as school leaders, you probably had to deal with them sometimes. Like, how do we get their discoveries back into our classroom conversations rather than disregard them? What are your thoughts about that?
Megan, you want to go first? You want me to try?
I'm happy to go first, and
Go
then
for it.
I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to share. So I think often teachers create what they experience. So and that's a quote that I stolen from Katie Martin. I try to be really good about quoting people. Most of my good stuff is taken from somewhere else. So Katie wrote Learner-Centered Innovation, and it's actually the title. That is the title of one of the chapters from that book. And I just think it's important that we recognize that we can't leap over the adults when trying to reach student learners. And so, how do we make sure that we aren't disregarding the valuable skills and assets and connections to our community that our staff bring into our school ecosystems?
Mhm.
And how do we create experiences that honor their learning needs and styles and interests in a way that's really human centered? And then how do we also name, so not just model, but name, because we're quite busy people. So sometimes you have to be really explicit about the thing that you're trying with them that they might bring right back into their classroom. And so I think I'm just big on whether it's a staff meeting or a PD or um, all the times that we're connecting with the adults, how do we model the good that we want to see in our classrooms?
So the modeling question is nice. Rafe, you want to build on that or go in a different direction?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Megan's spot on. I think there's a component of modeling. Look, I think there's an element of kind of there's a fractal element here, like because like as a charter school, the PED award rewards compliant charters and compliant and compliant administrations and then administrations reward compliant teachers and teachers reward compliant students, right? And so kids who comply, like going down following that, are easy and they're easy to work with. I think in order to really foster the creativity that I think that Tim that you were alluding to, you need strong teachings, like teachers who can overcome the behaviors and not see that as like you're disrupting my system, as opposed to I should create a system as a strong teacher to allow kids to step into spaces that they want to discover, right? I think there is a level of teaching prowess that comes to be able to do that. And I think project-based learning and things where you're allowing kids to create things to their own just assets, talents, but also their own interests, I think is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to live in a society where we do have to comply sometimes, right? So I think there's a merger of those two concepts of, being able to explore and be a discoverer, but knowing that we all live in a society that has to be able to fit together in some way so that we can get along and, flourish together, right, as a healthy society. I do think there's something to be said about schools that can be created that push teachers into that space of accepting students' ability and desire to step out of sit down, shut up, and learn spaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big thing. In our place with disability, because we're almost 70% disability, with most of those being either 1%ers or 2%ers, like really high levels of need. We're almost forced, because our kids are so individualized, to really look at systems in a way that we can do things to accentuate their interests and their individual needs, if that makes sense, right? A lot could be learned from the disability world in
Mhm.
application to the reg ed world. I don't.
Megan or Dana, you want to build on that, or want me to take us in a different direction?
So I'm just curious because we're talking about disregarding students, and typically we find that disregard might come at one particular end of the spectrum. But so my daughter this week had to do a speech for her dual enrollment public speaking class, and she asked me if I would look it over the night before and if I had any suggestions. And I asked her, can I publish this on LinkedIn? Because her entire speech was why the grading system is wrong. And she is, top 1% in her class, kind of duking it out with a couple of kids, and is in the gifted program and only takes AP courses and dual enrollment. And her whole speech was about, I've learned to play the game of school. And I'm taking a physical education class that is a dual enrollment class at the community college to increase my GPA, instead of taking one of the courses here, like a team sports or something that I would really enjoy, because I'm trying to be at the top of my class because of the way that the grading system has worked. And really, we've been disregarded in some way as human beings, because now those of us at this end of the spectrum have decided that we've got to play this game of school, because we've been defined by the way in which the system works. But also our voices have been disregarded, because nobody's
Mhm.
really understanding or seeing that it doesn't matter where we fall on the spectrum, nobody's really happy with the way that grades work. And so it's kind of interesting to, I think, just consider the perspectives from this end of the spectrum, this end of the spectrum, and kind of where are we in the middle too, and how much
Mhm.
disregard has just been across the board, because the system has always worked for so many years in this way, and this is the way that I was taught, and I had grades, and you need to be that great student, or I really don't care about the grades, because you're not going to go to college and you can work this blue collar job, but then that's the kid that's making $110,000 a year because he or she has chosen a pathway that, hey, we all need you in that particular service industry. So
Yep.
it's interesting to think about that disregard and that discovery from all those perspectives.
So yeah, you hit on something. I really appreciate that. Let me tell you this. So I have 3 kids, right? My oldest one is Catholic school educated, private school, Air Force Academy, graduated, and masters from and she's an officer in the military, and masters from Notre Dame. So I'm very proud dad, all that stuff. But she played the game, right? She
Mhm.
was good at the game. my son, that was the impetus to start this little school that I'm at, the Albuquerque Sign Language Academy. We don't give grades to, I mean, we give grades, I guess, because the state requires you give them, but we care about their learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And based on the needs of the kids, the needs of the family, and their desires, and kind of what direction they need them to be, in a way to be independent. And that's in the world of disability. And when I'm talking for my son, it's developmentally disabled, special needs kids. There is that element of teaching to their needs that creates a purposeful life, right? Not just a way to get good grades. But I guess it's actually, as I'm saying, it's probably part of the same system, right? I mean, what is success in each realm? And for Ben, my special needs son, it's this. And for Ari, my whatever she superstar that she was, it's this, right? And they both play their game to their needs. That makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? Megan, you're pondering.
I am. Well, I was just thinking about how many things we could say that we play games with in school, like even the teacher
Oh, good.
evaluation system, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a little
Yep.
bit of a like, let me play this game a little bit. And I think a lot of and I don't mean like the good games really, like I'm
Right.
talking about those kinds of games, but I think it's all rooted somewhere in fear. And what are we afraid of? I guess would be, the question. And I'm really intrigued that Dana brought up grades, specifically in class rank and things of that nature. In a previous school district I served in, um, we were a very traditionally successful school district, two high school system, and we were finding that kids were taking courses to see if they could, kind of leapfrog over people who were at a higher class rank than them. And then we got to asking ourselves, why is class rank on transcripts? The story we were telling ourselves was that it's
Mm-hmm.
because it's what universities were looking at. And so it was really time for us to discover,
Mm-hmm.
with lots of stakeholders at the table with us. Like we had the mom of the junior who was in the number one spot, and we had counselors and administrators and teachers, and we called universities ourselves. Let's call the universities, the top universities that our students attend, and the most commonly attended ones too. And that mom in particular, you call the school of that your son is, you're hoping that he attends, and let's hear what they have to say about the way we weight grades and class rank and valedictorian, salutatorian. And we uncovered that the story we were telling ourselves, we were doing this to prepare kids for what was next, and in fact, it really was. They were undoing it in the application process because everybody was weighting grades differently. Some people have class ranks, some don't. And they had their own formula for figuring things out. And there were just some general things that were important for us to all know. And I guess I should just share that to say it's so often that I think we're afraid, right? We're afraid that we're
Mm-hmm.
not doing justice by kids. We're afraid that like they're not going to be ready for their next thing. And sometimes I just wonder, okay, well, maybe instead of worrying so much about getting eighth graders ready for high school, what does it look like to be ready for eighth grade and have a really great
Mm-hmm.
learning experience in eighth grade? And if we're afraid that they won't be able to handle what we might consider not ideal instruction at a college level after they leave us, is the best way. This is my friend Kelly Wegner who says these things. Is the best way to prepare kids for poor instruction to offer poor instruction? I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know,
that's
right?
a great question, Megan. And I love that you brought the question of fear in, right? Um, because I do think that there's a lot of game playing that goes around wherever fear lurks, right? Like we play certain games when we are afraid of what we might discover, right? You might call them their routine games or something. And I mentioned this book beforehand. My wife gave it to my for my birthday, and I haven't had to start reading it yet. But it's called Game Changer, and it's about the way that people who play games, like in their personal life, right, tend to be very effective in their professional life because they understand ways to innovate and change the game to their advantage, right? Because they really know the games inside and out. And I want to go back to something that you mentioned, Rafe. You brought up the question of interests, and in particular, that it's in the interest of the students at your school to be independent, right? You're primarily concerned about them being able to independently navigate the world. And it seems to me, Megan, your story of discovery was so great because it's a game that we play with this class ranking stuff, because we're afraid if we don't, that our best kids won't get a leg up, right? Like if we can't say they're number one in the class, that they won't get a leg up in what they do next and they won't find the right place to go. But as Dana pointed out in her comment, right? Um, who's to say that the right place for them to go is necessarily more school, right? Or, from good school to better school to better school, which is, of course, what my life worked out like, until I got done with school. And I think, Rafe, of Tony Monfiletto, uh, who founded the leadership networks in schools in Albuquerque that I did so much work with, he used to always say that the only thing schools are good at is preparing kids for more school, right? Because we're afraid of what will happen if we try to prepare them for world outside of school and it doesn't work, right? Um, so I just think this question of like, what's in our kids' interests? Is it in our interest to teach them how to play games, whether it's in school or at sports, because then they'll be good at playing games out in the world. And I spend a lot of time in politics, as you know. There are plenty of games there. There's plenty of game in the corporate world, right? All those games are there. Or is it in our interests to help them be, as both of you have mentioned, more for us to be more student centered and really sort of figuring out who the kid is and what they're trying to do in the world. I think whenever we start to ask those questions, we get seen as disagreeable, right? Because we're challenging the established games in our systems. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, I there's a lot of truth to what you said, right? I would say this though, and again, I'm coming from a perspective I know is different because I created it to be different. So we
Right.
actually use our disregarded population as to an advantage because there was not much work, and I would say even good work. If there was work, there wasn't very good for the students that we work with, right? In the deaf
Mm-hmm.
disability world. So they were always like, well, yeah, I'm what do you think? And so the fact that we can kind of that grades and the systems that you guys are talking about, school rank, class ranking and that kind of stuff, they don't apply to us, gives us it's liberating. I got to tell you,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have to live by grades and kind of that whole old world of traditional school stuff, it's liberating to just teach kids to their purpose, to their pursuits of what makes them happy, that kind of stuff, right? And then in our case now, because the K-12 system in New Mexico for the world of disability ends at the age of 22, and there's very little after from 22
Mm-hmm.
to death. Basically, there's day habs and things like that. We are now on this path of building out a disability university that the state's going to endorse around this, like a New Mexico workforce training center for developmental disability adults with developmental disabilities, right? Which again is uncharted territory where this population is disregarded, which allows us the freedom to say, we'll do it, just get out of the way, and we'll tell you what to create, right? But it's based in the same thing, Tim, that you're talking about. It's student centered, but it really is building out ways where people can find their purpose in life, right? Through an education, not standard based test taking. It's education, learning how to live a good life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Through skills and through contributing to the betterment of the world, that kind of stuff. Like our kids are not just our kids, everyone loves that stuff, kids and teachers alike. So because we don't have to play school like the rest of the maybe school world has to, we have a leg up. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, it's liberating.
Well, I think that that is just a perfect example of Adam Grant's book on Think Again, the power of knowing what you don't know. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it's liberating and not having the grades and not having to play by the system, if someone else were from a much more traditional schooling background come in and see that, maybe that would give them that power to think again, because that's not what they don't know it. This system works for us. You know, we're ranked as a very high school and our test scores are great. And we have this percentage of graduating seniors that go on to secondary education. But it's about thinking again, thinking about that system again, because they don't know what they don't know. So I think it's just a great example of why we need to think again.
Yeah. Dana,
Yeah,
but
and it's
oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I look, I think Megan said it right. And look, the drivers to all the traditional systems that just stay in place are universities that people like that it is their thing to go to that university, right? And it does. So if you were to look at our school grade by the state, we're at the bottom of the list because we're 70% special ed. So so like a regulated kid, one kid tanks and it takes the whole school down, right? So
Yep.
on the state, and the state knows this, that the state grading system, we're here, but the charter world knows we're here, right? Working with the likes of Penn State, Harvard, those kind of guys. And they're like, you're onto something and you don't fit this. We still have to give you this grade though, right? So the system is still saying, on this hand, yeah, you're horrible, but in this hand, we're going to build you a school. We're touting you as the best, one of the best schools, most innovative schools in the nation, but you still get this F grade, right? That contradiction is, I'm not going to fight it in my lifetime. I know I'm not, right? But I fought this one to get us here. I won't fight that one because I can't move that one.
Yeah, and Megan, I know that you have been fighting some of these struggles within more traditional systems, right? I mean, you were one of the people in our conversation who raised student-centered fairly early, right? And have worked on that. And while Rafe's in an ideal situation where he is able to avoid some aspects of the system, right? What do you see as some of the guardrails that you're bumping up against that it's going to require more disagreement to open a space of discovery that you imagined?
Well, in the story I told about the previous school district I worked in, we did remove class rank from transcripts. We did eliminate Val Sal in honor of a Latin honor system to recognize more students. And since then, there's I've been in other districts where we've grown the various ways that we can celebrate all kinds of excellence
Hmm.
across post high school plans for students. But and honestly, the district that I'm in now was one of our inspirations for that change, because the district I'm in now had made this change a decade before we looked at doing so. And it helps to look down the street and say, wow, well, if they can do it, maybe we can too.
Hmm.
All of that to say, like, I've given you some big examples of things that felt big, right? Like, I thought that there were going to be parents with pitchforks coming to the board meeting to take me down. And I had a job coach that I was talking through things with, and I was having a panic attack before this, having to present at this board meeting. And she's like, what's the worst thing that can happen? We did some fear setting together, right? And I said, well, parents come and they're really mad and I end up on the local news. She's like, okay, great. And then what happens? I'm like, and then I get fired. And she's like, great. And then what happens? I'm like, lady, did you just not hear that I got fired? Like, does it get worse than that? And she's like, don't you think you would find another job? And do you believe in this work that you're doing? And I did believe in it. And we
Hmm.
had done it the right way. And there was a process engaging people and gathering feedback from the community and student voice. And so, and it did pass. And I had to do the math. Like, I think educational leaders have to do some math. When you have done things the right way and you believe in something that you're leading that is feeling disruptive,
Hmm.
um, if you count the number of emails that you get as an example, and then you count the number of people that you serve, in my case, in that instance, less than 1% of people were infuriated, right? That's a
Yep.
pretty good indication that we were on the right track. But all of this to say, that feels big. I think there's so many small ways, I think I just want to notice and name for us like small ways, like being in classrooms alongside teachers is a small move that anybody who's thinking about making any kind of change, put on your tennis shoes. Tim knows I'm big on that. Like, put on your tennis shoes, get in classrooms with teachers, right? The best answers are solved together with curiosity, with our sleeves rolled up, figuring it out together. And so, I think just do what you can, like with what you have where you are, right? Like, there's that quote. Um, And so I just think sometimes it's funny you brought up games, Tim. I have never really been a gamer, but suddenly I've gotten really into Candy Crush. And it's because
Okay.
I'm disassociating. I'm disassociating at night because I'm so overwhelmed and daunted by the challenges that I'm facing, that I need to like go somewhere else for a while.
Yep.
The problem is I need to be able to figure out how to tap in again tomorrow, and to try again tomorrow, and to do what little thing I can do, and to fix my mind on like what progress we're making on this little thing, and help others train their brains to do the same so that we have the energy to try again tomorrow. And there's some science of hope on this. And I heard Rafe talk about some things that are in your school about purpose that are really rooted in the science of hope. Okay, like hope is a word that we often conflate with wishing. Like, I hope we get a snow day tomorrow. I hope
Right.
that this happens. But hope is action. There's just three components to it. And this is all from the research of C.R. Snyder. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the first component of hope is that you have a really meaningful goal that you're trying to pursue, a personally meaningful goal. So, something that I'm really working on is when I use language like student centered, and the work that Tim and I did together, we were talking about creating like a student centered ecosystem. And what does it look like to take some small steps forward with teachers on that? And then I felt so convicted last week at a conference, in a good way, where somebody says something and you think, ooh, there's something there. And like, I need to think about myself and my practices. And it was the current CEO for ISD, ASD, and he said ASCD, and he said we talk a lot about being student centered, but I think often we're centering kids in things they don't want to be in the center of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so like language matters. Like, what do we really mean when we talk about this? So, anyway, like meaningful personal purpose, multiple pathways to get there, right? So that I can see, like, if I'm facing some challenges, okay, that's just an obstacle. I can reroute and try something else instead. And then finally, when those two things are true, we have more agency and we have more resilience. And it's more meaningful for us to try again tomorrow. Because as Jamie Mead, former vice president at Battelle for Kids, would say, we often conflate hopelessness with laziness. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Megan. I just had the opportunity earlier this year to participate in 3 hope sessions, basically led by someone who is using that same framework, with a lot of people who are despairing, and have lost hope and are basically curling up at home and drinking lots of wine. But I want to tap into this question of disassociation as we start to wrap up. All right. I think we all know that educators are super busy, right? And you mentioned that yourself, Megan. I know Rafe is good now. He's not only just opening a school, but maybe a university, right? Um, and Dana and I are very busy as well. We often, I think, get so busy that we can't disassociate, right? Like it's like you're just at work as long as you're awake, right? Because you're still thinking about work when you go home, or you're still doing work at 11 o'clock at night. Um, and I just wonder, like talking about playing a game as a dissociation, as an escape. I wonder if that's a small move that we need to be encouraging people to make, is like saying it's okay to disassociate from this. I think one of the things that our system of school motivates people to do out of fear is make them think they have to be busy all the time, right? Whether you're a superintendent, whether you're a principal, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a student, there's this like, you must be busy all the time. Tell us about some of the small moves that you maybe make to help people disassociate as we start to disassociate toward the end of this conversation.
Give it
Any
to you.
thoughts on that?
I can jump in and then maybe you can build on it.
Yep.
So, I want to clarify that I'm not playing Candy Crush at work. I feel like I should make sure I say
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Um, and yet, I do think that having some moments of levity and some breaks. I mean, I watched elementary teachers today, which I just, if you're in administration and your day is heavy and your heart is heavy, like please go visit a kindergarten classroom. Like it's
Hmm.
just such a joy, right, to see curiosity in action. And they were taking a brain break. And it was a reminder, like, wow, how effective, right? Like, let's just take 30 seconds together and like give ourselves a moment. But I would say that's one small move, is to get out of your space, and take a walk. And Lainey Rao calls them savoring walks. I've heard them called other things, but essentially like taking a moment to actually like feel your feet on the ground, feel the sun on your skin if you're outside, see the incredible things in action. I mean, if you think about the number of things it takes to pull off a school day in one day, it's absolutely miraculous. Like when the windows are clean every morning when the kids come in, the fact that like the bus got them safely to school and someone made them a hot breakfast and lunch, and the teachers are waiting to greet them at the door. Like it all works because everybody works. And so
Mhm.
I just think taking a moment to be grateful for all the little moves that people are making is one small strategy, and then making sure that we extend that to people when we see it. So I have
Yeah.
a Mike Rutherford strategy that I like to use called 30-second feedback. Just a little protocol. It's a quick little note. You would think that it wouldn't mean much to people, but people have told me that they save them, and then they get embarrassed that they've saved them. And then I heard two teachers like in my last district be like, "You save your notes? I have a whole drawer full of them." So it's just amazing, I think, what I guess extending some gratitude and presence can do for us
Yeah.
when we don't have access to Candy Crush.
Yeah, well, and I love those walks. I don't do them so much, but my wife will deliberately schedule meetings at different places on campus far away so that she can walk to them, right? And get like 15 minutes between meetings in her role at University of Northern Colorado. Rafe, how about you? What are some small moves you make to allow learners to disassociate long enough that they might discover something that would otherwise be disregarded?
I like the Candy Crush answer the best. My version of that is called, a thing called Homescape, which is like Candy Crush, but then you actually redo a house at the same time. So anyway, um, well, so this, so again, I feel like I'm in a different space. I think when I was in the district, in admin spaces, and the weight of compliance and moving big chunks of public education, that was daunting. Megan, my hats off to you, man. I think that's amazing. Um, that's not the case now. I'm playing with house money right now. I really am. We've fought for 15 years to get in a place where we're held in very high regard by the state, and it results in good stuff that where I get to in playing with house money, I get to create. I'm living on the creative side of education, not the deficit side.
Hmm.
So it's unfair for me to say, because I've been in those other spaces, and it's tough, man, to disassociate from the pressures of the job, because they're real. I would say this. I would say I do have hobbies, and I'm still coaching. I know Dr. Dana and I were talking about the emphasis of sports in our families. And so my youngest one, 13, is still playing. So I get away from the education space because I teach him basketball. I guess I'm still teaching, but it's something that it's not book learning, I guess. But um, but I got to tell you that when I'm doing things like taking walks or doing things, my mind automatically goes to the space around the creating of systems in the school to make it better. So, but it goes back to what you were talking about, Megan, the discovery. I'm discovering things that I hadn't thought about in the joy of our school, not
Hmm.
not not the drudgery of the work, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm also way older than you, man. So so and there with age comes this attitude of it is a game, and and I'm in control of things right now, and I have the years to just have an attitude to say, yeah, I'm not going to do that, or that's not what we're about, and stand for that.
Yeah.
There again, there's liberation in that type of attitude.
Yeah. So it sounds like maybe what we need to do is disregard to discover,
Yeah,
right?
it's not
Um,
wrong.
yeah.
Disregarding status quo is good for your soul.
No, and Rafe, I know how hard you fought in those
Yeah.
early years, right? So thank you for doing that. And Megan, I know you've been a big fighter. Dana, I am gonna have to pop off pretty soon, so I want to give you a last word opportunity to wrap us up.
Yeah, so as we think about the disassociation for teachers in terms of discovery, I it makes me again go back to that space of our learners and allowing them to disassociate from the system to discover more about themselves and where they want to go in life and how to solve these real world complex problems that we're just not giving them 100% opportunity to explore and discover through in the majority of our classrooms today. So, you know, as we think about disassociation in a classroom, it's often thought of in a very negative space, that our students are becoming disengaged from the process. And maybe that disassociation is actually really good. And if we listen to our learners, whether it's, you know, my junior 17-year-old that has written a speech that she's only given to her class, but said more people need to hear this, or if it's somebody from the deaf and hard of hearing community that says, you know what, we've got some ideas on how to open the world up for us too. And so maybe allowing for more of that to happen in the classrooms, and opening ourselves up as educators to say that's not necessarily a push against the system so much as in, I'm totally disregarding the system, but I'm just trying to rediscover where the system could go in the future to be more inclusive of everyone and everyone's needs.
Great way to end, Dana. And thank you, Rafe and Megan, for joining us tonight for what was another really wonderful conversation. It's good to see you both.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Genuinely enjoyed it.